The British opposition wants to make problems caused by Brexit an election issue, and London Mayor Khan hopes for a new agreement to stimulate the economy and raise living standards. So Sadiq Aman Khan is the mayor of the metropolis and one of the most prominent faces of the opposition Labour Party. The British Social Democrats are apparently planning to make closer reconnection of the United Kingdom with the European Union, the EU, an issue. And this is supported by numerous statements from Labour representatives and statements by Khan to the British newspaper Observer. Khan told the paper he wanted to make travel between the Union and Great Britain easier, and this requires either the introduction of an agreement for easier mobility for young people or changes to the visa regulations that have indeed been enforced since Brexit. It's not about Great Britain rejoining the EU, but what is needed is a pragmatic debate as to whether the country should rejoin the internal market and the customs union, said Khan, although he makes it to himself a bit easy because that is not a thing that you can just do. According to The Observer, the statements indicate that Khan wants to focus on pro-European messages in the run-up to the mayoral elections in the British capital in May 24. They are also likely to have coordinated with Labour leader Keir Starmer. In a speech in mid-January, Khan had already called for a new agreement with the EU that could stimulate their economy and increase the standard of living of the British people. Khan described Brexit as a key factor in the crisis and the cost of living caused by inflation in the United Kingdom. Brexit is not working, said Khan, who is seeking a third term in local elections in May. We have to be honest, Brexit is simply not a side issue that we can leave to the past, explained Khan. And he's not alone in his party. In a letter to Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden, from which the newspaper Financial Times quotes, Labour leader Nick Thomas-Symonds writes that from January 31st there will be queues at ports, delays in imports and an increase in inflation of food prices. The government must ensure that businesses and consumers are prepared for change and take urgent action to minimize disruption to supply chains. After several postponements, Great Britain now also wants to introduce import controls for animal and plant products from the EU on January 31st. Companies then have to enter their customs declarations in advance and declare agricultural and food exports to Great Britain. Experts warn of additional bureaucratic effort and delays. Great Britain left the EU at the end of January 2020, and since January 1st in 2021, the country is no longer a member of the EU customs union or the internal market. And this led to considerable delays in trading, especially at the beginning. On the EU side, imports from Great Britain have been checked for 3 years now. It is crucial to minimize the friction and disruption caused by the measures you have committed to introducing, wrote Labour politician Thomas-Symonds. He called for negotiations on a sanitary and phytosanitary agreement with the EU to reduce trade barriers. The British government defended the introduction of controls. They will ensure the most advanced border in the world. Oh, that again. Thanks to modern technology, trading would be simplified. The changes we're introducing will help keep the UK safe while protecting our food supply chains and agricultural sector from diseases that would cause significant economic damage, they said in London. EU member Ireland also called on companies to prepare for changes. The United Kingdom continues to be an important market for Irish exports, so the smooth transition to these new British requirements will be very important for us, warned Foreign Minister Micheál Martin. More than a third of Irish exports go to the UK, the largest market for Irish food, drink and horticultural products. And Irish authorities have prepared contingency plans to manage traffic in case trucks arrive at Dublin port without the necessary documents. On January 31st, 2020, as I said, the United Kingdom left the European Union, and Brexit had far-reaching consequences for the British economy that are still being felt today. One of the most important consequences of Brexit is the change in trade relations between Great Britain and the EU. Before Brexit, Great Britain was part of the EU internal market and the customs union, and this meant that goods and services could be traded between the UK and the EU without tariffs and other barriers to trade. After Brexit, Great Britain is no longer a member of the internal market, and this means that tariffs and other trade barriers apply to trade between the UK and the EU, and this has led to a reduction in trade between the two sides. According to a study by the British Centre for European Reform, Brexit will have reduced British trade with the EU by 16% by mid-22, and this has led to a loss of jobs and economic growth. And Britain has also led to a reduction in foreign direct investment in the UK. No, not Britain, Brexit did. Before Brexit, Britain was a popular destination for foreign investors who benefited from access to the EU internal market. And post-Brexit, Britain has become less attractive to foreign investors as they now have to consider tariffs and other barriers to trade with the EU. And according to a study by the British Chambers of Commerce, Brexit has reduced foreign direct investment in the UK by 20%, and this has led to a loss of jobs and economic growth as well. Brexit also has an impact on the British labour market. Before Brexit, EU citizens could work in Great Britain without any restrictions. After Brexit, EU citizens must now apply for a visa to work in the UK. And this has resulted in it becoming more difficult for UK companies to recruit skilled workers from the EU. And according to a study by the British think tank Resolution Foundation, up to 2 million jobs in the UK will be lost by 2030 as EU citizens will no longer be able to work in the UK without a visa. Brexit also has an impact on British consumption. Before Brexit, British consumers were able to benefit from lower prices for goods and services from the EU. After Brexit, some tariffs now apply to goods and services from the EU, and this has led to an increase in prices for British consumers, and that will rise with the new checks as well. And according to a study by the British National Institute of Economic and Social Research, Brexit increased inflation in Great Britain by 0.5 percentage points. Overall, Brexit has had a negative impact on economic growth in Great Britain. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, predicts that Great Britain's gross domestic product will be 5.5% lower by 2030 than it would have been without Brexit. The negative effects of Brexit can be observed primarily in the areas of trade, investment, and the labour market, and these effects will be felt for several years to come. Brexit has indeed far-reaching consequences for the British economy. These consequences can be observed primarily, as I said, in the areas of trade, investment, and the labour market, and the negative effects of Brexit will be felt for many years, also for people trying to travel. But I just quickly mentioned what Khan said about this. I will talk about the traveling part a little bit more in the next days. And if you want to see another video right now, the next one is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.